Well, hello my friends, and welcome to today's Patron video. I'm going to be talking about materials. This video is geared primarily to beginners. Even if you're a seasoned artist, hopefully you'll find this video useful as well. I'm going to go over my favorite types and brands of brushes and what you need to get into watercolor if you don't have any of these materials. These are all readily available online internationally, so it should not be an issue in finding any of this stuff. Okay, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the most important, second most important tool, which is the watercolor brush. The most important tool is the paper, and it's so important that I'm going to be discussing that in a separate video. But right now we're going to talk brushes, and then we're going to talk about the difference between pan watercolors and watercolors in tubes. First of all, about brushes. Anything that I do on my Patreon for tutorials for you guys, all you're really going to need for that is going to be a round watercolor brush. And I would recommend getting them in these sizes, regardless of brand. You're going to want a 2 round. This is for fine detail work. You'll want a 4. That says 7 because this is European, but in America it would be a 6 or a 7. And then you're going to want a 10. Again, that's a 2, a 4, a 6 or a 7, and a 10. That's all you're going to need in terms of brush sizes. Now, in terms of brush type, you'll be using a watercolor brush. And a watercolor brush, basically, it has very soft bristles. It'll be labeled as a watercolor brush. You can just pop it into Google or into your Amazon and find them that way. I do use a brand called Tintorero. Tintorero is available at A Gallo Watercolors online. I will link to them below. These are excellent. An issue that watercolor brushes can have is that they'll shed, and you'll end up with, a strand of, bristle in your painting, and then you'll have to be real careful about how you pick it out so that you don't mush up the color and all. These have never shed on me, and I've used these a lot. What you also want to look for in a watercolor brush, you need a short handle. Brushes for like oil paints and acrylics will sometimes come with a really long handle. The reason they have a really long handle is because that artist is usually working at an easel, and you're not standing, right next to the easel with your brush like this doing fine detail. You're kind of standing a little back and you're holding the brush. You got a longer handle and you're painting. Watercolor for detail work, you have to basically be right on top of it. A shorter brush is much easier to handle than a longer one because you don't have the excess weight up here, and it's better for control. So always look for the shorter handles. These handles are, let me measure them. These are 5.5-inch handles, which is basically, that's the average for watercolor brushes. And again, you'll want the round brush. We won't really be doing anything that necessitates you buying a flat brush, but if you buy a set of watercolors and they also include flats, what they're used for is for watercolor washes, which you can use the larger 10 size for that as well in the round. So you don't really need to get the flat brushes. Now, another brand I really, really like is available at thepigeonletters.com. I will link to Peggy's site below as well. These brushes I really like because, again, they're soft, they're good for watercolor. They have a real nice spring to them. I don't know if you can hear it, but listen. Hear that? these are really good for lettering. And a lot of times when you're an artist, you might want to include lettering in your composition somewhere, especially if you watercolor in your journal. You may want to letter a quote or something. And I will be teaching you all how to do lettering with a paintbrush, as well as a little cheat with a brush marker, which is a lot easier to handle than a paintbrush. But these are really good for that. And they, again, she makes really fine detail brushes. So this one here is a liner brush, and it is size 20/0. So 20/0. And then we have this one here, and this is a number 2, which if you look, it's a little bit smaller than the Tintorero number 2. And that's because different manufacturers will create the brush in slightly different size. So you may have to be kind of experimenting with different manufacturers to find that size that you really like. But, you know, I use both of these. But again, this set from Peggy Dean from the Pigeon Letters, I use mainly for brush lettering. So again, with her, I would recommend the 20/0 or 20/0. And then there's the number 2. The number 4, which isn't here. I don't know what happened to my number 4. It's around. The number 4. And then, oh, I see another one here. Let me grab it right quick. Okay, and then I recommend her 8. This is the 8. And then again, the 10. Now in her set, there's not really a whole lot of difference between the 8 and the 10 in terms of doing watercolor washes with it. You get kind of the same effect with both. So if you're, you know, got constrictions on your budget, you may just want to get the 20/0, the 2, the 6, and the 8. Leave off the 10. But if you've got the money, get the 10. I mean, it's a great, great brush. Really, really wonderful brush. Those are my favorites. These are moderately priced brushes. Believe it or not, there are some brushes there that cost like $60 a piece. Needless to say, I've never used them. But also, if you are budget conscious, I have 2 brands here that I really love, and I used these in the majority of my art career until just in the past few years. The first one, the brand is called Simply Simmons. Simply Simmons is found at the Michael's craft store chain here in America. They may be overseas, I don't know. But again, they have a watercolor brush, and again, very soft bristles. This, by the way, is a fan brush. You will not be needing a fan brush for anything that I teach you on Patreon. I only grabbed this one because my other Simply Simmons, I loaned them to my daughter, so she's got all of them except for this one. But I really like these brushes. Again, they come with the shorter watercolor handle. So this is 6.5 inches, and it compares, you know, to Peggy Dean's and to Tintorero. You know, they're all very comparable in size, and that's what you're looking for, 5 to 6 inches in the brush, in the handle size. Simply Simmons is really inexpensive, and Michael's often has these on sale. Now, they may have switched them out for their other house brand called Artist's Loft. I meant to go take a look at Michael's before I filmed this video, and I just didn't have time to do it, so I'm not sure. But if they don't have the Simply Simmons, the Artist's Loft is comparable to the Simply Simmons, just in case you go there and you're like, well, this isn't there, but they have this. Yeah, Artist's Loft, that's Michael's house brand. Now, if you do your shopping at Hobby Lobby, Hobby Lobby's house brand is called Master's Touch. And their brushes are more or less multi-purpose. Their softer bristled brushes are for oil, acrylic, and watercolor. Personally, I wouldn't use these with the oils because they're not stiff enough for oils. And depending on what you want to do with acrylic, actually, I don't think they're stiff enough for acrylic either, but that's just my opinion. Watercolor, though, they work great. And again, the handle size is very much identical to the others. So, and it is a more inexpensive brush than the Pigeon Letters and the Tintoretto. Also, if you order from A Gaio, they're coming from Italy. So if you're in America, shipping is actually pretty fast. I think I got my brushes in like a week. So don't hesitate to order from them just because they're overseas and you think it'll take forever. It won't. It'll take around a week, maybe a week and a half. I'm here in Texas, so it took about a week. Now, if you want to go ultra cheap, you can, especially when you're a beginner. You don't want to start off with high dollar stuff. That's why I talked about Simply Simmons, Artist Loft, and Master's Touch. Again, Master's Touch is from Hobby Lobby, craft store chain here in America. All you're really looking for is a brush that has soft bristles that are very flexible bristles. And it's very important that when wet, the brush comes to a point. That's extremely important in watercolor. Now, all of these that I've shown you from these other two brands, you're going, well, those don't come to a point. They do when they're wet. And that's what counts. When they're dry, doesn't matter what they look like. When they're wet, you need them to come to a point, especially for brush lettering and for fine detail work with watercolor. The last brush I want to talk about is the water brush. The water brush is plastic, and the bristles are covered, and it screws apart. And it screws backwards. You know how it's lefty-loosey, righty-tighty? Well, with a water brush, it's righty-loosey, lefty-tighty, which doesn't rhyme, but there you go. The reason they screw backwards is because when you are using your brush, okay, now I can't get it back together. This is actually a really cheap one. Wow. Yeah, I can't get it back on there. Oops. Oh, it's because I'm screwing the wrong way. Yeah, screw it to the left. Okay. The reason it screws on backwards is because when you're painting, you're holding it up here where the threads are for the screw mechanism. And as you're turning your brush and painting, what happens is if it's a lefty-loosey, righty-tighty screwed on bristles, it's going to come undone, and the water is going to end up coming out of the receptacle and getting all over your painting and ruining it. So they've designed the water brush to screw backwards. So it's righty, loose, lefty, tight. And all you do is you just take it and you open it up and you hold the receptacle under the water and fill it up to like 3/4. Don't fill it all the way because there needs to be a little bit of give in there, because sometimes for washes you're going to need a little bit more water to come out, and you would then squeeze it to get some more water to come out through the bristles. So it's a different creature, the water brush. A lot of people really prefer it, and again, it comes to a very fine point, and water brushes tend to maintain their point when they're dry. And that's because they have acrylic bristles. So, just another option. These are almost always sold in sets. Pentel makes a really good water brush. Let me grab one right quick so I can show you all. And there's the Pentel brand you can buy in a set or singly. So this is the Pentel water brush. Again, it's the exact same principle. You've got a cap for the bristles. This happens to be a flat, kind of like a filbert shaped brush head. And again, you unscrew it to the left, so it screws backwards. There's the receptacle. And again, I would fill it 3/4 of the way. This actually has a fill line marked on it. I never noticed that before. So there's the fill line. So you'd fill it up that high, because again, if you're going to be doing a wash and you need more water to come through the bristles, there's got to be a little bit of air in here to allow you to press it. So see how flexible it is? So you can get that water to come out. So there are the different type of brushes. Now I want to talk about the paint. I'm going to take this off of here. Before I start talking about the paints, 2 more things about your brushes that you need to know, especially if you're a beginner. You can invest in a little brush rest or anything to rest your brush on as you're painting, and it just keeps the bristles off of your work surface, and it keeps your brush, it prevents your brush from rolling around. So that's something you may want to look into. And again, you can, search for these online. A lot of people on Etsy make their own ceramics. That's where I bought this one from. This is from Lisa Alden Art, and she is on Instagram. And if I remember, I'll link to her below. And if I don't remember, it's Lisa, Lisa Alden, Alden Art, all one word, on Instagram. And she also has an Etsy shop. So she made this. She makes a lot of cute stuff. I have a couple of her things. And also about brushes, when you're using them, after you're done, never leave them sitting in your water. That will ruin your bristles. That will permanently curve the bristles. Always take them out of the water. Store them upright. And that, again, protects the health of your bristles. Prevents them from shedding. Even with a cheapy brush like this one, which I got for free with a paint kit years ago. It's actually a really good brush. I have another one just like it that I use, and all the gold paint just come off the handle. But I mean, it's a really good brush, and it doesn't shed. And I don't know where these brushes come from. I've got them in a couple of kits, and I was just like, oh, okay. But really nice. Okay, I want to talk again about another tool you will need as a watercolor artist, and that is a palette. And the palettes are used to hold your watercolor wash, because you don't just get water off the pan of paint or out of the tube. You can paint that way. There's nothing wrong with it. But with watercolor, the beauty of watercolor is you get such a variation in shade within a single color, depending on the amount of water you add to it. You can start with a light wash, and you can gradually, put some water in here, add some pink or whatever color you're working with, paint your light wash, and then you want a little bit darker, put a little bit more watercolor in with that mix, and it'll go on darker on the paper. Progressively darker with the more watercolor you add to your watery mix. And that's why we use a palette. Also, if you want to mix 2 colors together to come up with a 3rd color, you will need a palette, definitely. Palettes, the cheap ones are plastic. I don't recommend a plastic palette because the water beads on the plastic, and it just, I don't know. I just personally don't like them. I use porcelain. Now this porcelain palette, I did find at Hobby Lobby a few years ago, and it was literally like $5 back then. Of course, this was pre-pandemic. We all know what's happened to prices worldwide. I don't know how much it would be now. I'm guessing, and I mean, I'm really, really hoping it wouldn't be more than $10. Okay, if it's more than $10, get an old dish out of your cupboard and use that. The issue with using a dish is it doesn't have any compartments on it. If you have like some sort of serving dish that you don't use that has compartments on it, man, use that, because it's right there in your kitchen. It's for free. You already have it. But you will need a palette, definitely. You'll also need a cloth. I recycle my paper towels that I use in the kitchen. I dried my hands on this at some point and just lay it to dry. And then I use it to clean my brushes off on. You can use an old face towel, same thing, but you will need some type of cloth. Now about the paint. There are two types of paint. There are watercolors come in tubes and they come in pans. Let me crack this open. This is by Art Whale. It's available on Amazon. I will link to it below. It's very economically priced. The link will be an Amazon affiliate link, and I literally make like nothing off of those. It's like 5 cents or something. I mean, it's a ridiculously low amount. But here it is, and I got something on it, which is too bad because there we go, it's coming off. Okay. It comes with a cloth, and again, that could be your paint cloth too. Some sets do come with one. And this is a very generously sized paint cloth. You can either use it like it was in the box to wrap your case in, or use it to keep your brushes clean. Now, here is watercolors in a pan, which is how I prefer to use them personally. But it's up to you. You know, experiment, buy a couple of cheap tubes, buy a set of inexpensive pan watercolors, decide which form of watercolor you prefer. This happens to be a really, really nice set. I did review it on my YouTube channel. I will try to remember to link to that below. I'm going to have to rewatch this before I post it and write down everything I'm saying. I'm going to link to this below. So I link to everything. I love these. These are really, really good. They're very highly pigmented, so you get a lot of paint using very little color. So here are my swatches. They do come with names. I did not go through and name them. There's a master swatch somewhere. I don't know what happened to mine. I've got it around somewhere. But I made up my own because I like to use swatch on paper I commonly use. This happens to be Canson, which is one of the papers I will discuss in part 2 to this materials video. But as you can see how bright they are. I mean, I was amazed with this set. Because it is so inexpensive, you don't really expect quality, you know, when you're not spending much. And actually, in my case, the company sent this to me for free, for my honest opinion. And I was really happy. I was able to give them a really good review. I was really happy with these paints. And I have been using them. And they barely look used. I mean, look at this. You know, and I've done like, I don't know, 8 to 10 paintings with these. And they still look pretty much brand new. And I've been using pretty much all the colors. I do not tend to use earth tones too much, so I haven't really used these. I don't like browns. I'm not crazy about green, but I've used everything else multiple times. And this is a well where you would, you know, set your brush if you want to take it out somewhere. I don't remember. You would need to look on my review video. I believe these came individually wrapped in colored paper that corresponds to the color of the paint. I think they did. And I think they also have the name of the code name for the pigment used. I think that's on there too. But they're really nice, and they pop right out. They pop right out. Okay. So yeah, and I just went through and labeled them. This is cadmium red. And again, it's a really great set. I highly, highly recommend it, especially if you're a beginner. And even if you're not, and you just want a set of 48 paints that are inexpensive and you can use them to, you know, travel with, go for it. Like I said, I really like them. And then with this one, you get a metal palette. These are for large washes here. There's 4 compartments. And then you have on the other side, smaller compartments. You put your paint here. and then the water, and just kind of mix it upward. You could put something underneath it to keep it level if you want, but that's the idea for this half here. So these are, again, by Art Whale, and I will link to them below, available on Amazon, and you can also check out my review of them on YouTube. I will link to that below as well. Really nice, inexpensive set. So those are the pans. Oh, and then what you would do, of course, you would get your water on your brush and get the pan wet, or you can get a pipette. Pipette, I think that's what they're called. And it's just a syringe for the water. You just dip it in your water, fill it, and then you put a couple of drops on the pan. And then you take your brush, you dip it in there, add it on the palette, add some water, create your wash, and I'll go into that. That'll be like one of the very first lessons we do. But there you go. Your pipette. And again, you can keep that in there, and you can keep your brush in there, and you'd be good to go. Because you remember, the cloth comes wrapped around this. So you'll have everything you need. And then you use the metal compartments for your palette. Really nice set. Okay. The other form that watercolors come in is in tubes. Now, I gotta be honest with you, I don't like tubes. It's a personal preference for me because you may love them, you know? It depends. You know, get yourself an inexpensive couple of tubes. You know, you can get your basic red, yellow, blue, black and white. There are your primaries, and from there you can mix pretty much anything. The only reason I don't like them is because when I use them, I can never judge how much I'm going to need. And I almost always get too little or too much. It's never just right, you know, like Goldilocks. It's never just right. So what I do instead with tubes, because there are some brands that until recently were only available in tube form, like Daniel Smith. Daniel Smith has gone to making pans the last few years, but back in the day when I started painting, they just came in tubes. And so what I would do is I would take the tube and I would buy empty half pans on Amazon. And you can get them on Amazon. They come, they are relatively inexpensive, and it's just the pan and it's empty. So it's just going to be your plastic pan here. You can buy them just as a bunch of plastic pans that are empty, or you can get them in a holder, and they come in metal holders numbering 12, 24, and 48. This holds 48. So you can buy it all together, and then you have a bunch of empty pans in here. You pop them out, you squirt your tube paint into them, label them, and you'll have tube paint in pan form, which is what I did with my Daniel Smith collection. Okay, this is what I'm talking about, of being able to buy this with empty half pans. This was full. This holds 48. I used the other ones, and I'm not using this, but this whole metal thing in the center comes out. Here's one I bought on Amazon, and you can get them with different covers and whatever color scheme is pleasing to you. This is my swatch card. These are my Daniel Smith. This is my collection. This is all by Daniel Smith in here. And again, I just took the tube and I carefully put some paint in the empty half pan. And you'll need a toothpick because sometimes the color, the pigment will create air bubbles in it. So you just pop them with your toothpick and slowly continue to add the color until the pan is full. And it will create a little trivet in the center as it dries. It's going to dip a bit. And you can go back later and fill that up if you want a flat pan of paint. I didn't bother to do that with any of these, but you can if you want to. That's just a personal preference thing. Me, I don't care. But this is what I did because I can't deal with tubes. I just can't. I don't understand them. So this is the half pan collection of Daniel Smith. And if you do want to use that out of the tube, you would just open it. I'm not going to open these because they tend to kind of start leaking right away if I do. But you would just open it and put a real little bit on your palette, or maybe a lot, depending on how much you're going to use it. And you add your water to it. They come in different sizes and different price points. Here we have an Artist Loft. This is the Michael's Craft Store house brand, Artist Loft. Another low dollar amount to paint would be by Winsor and Newton. That is their Cotman line, C-O-T-M-A-N. That is a student grade watercolor. And then we have Daniel Smith, a little bit more expensive, but it's my preferred brand. I love tube paints. I really like them. And they come in different sizes once you get into this brand. We have this is the 5 milliliter, which is enough to fill 2 half pans. 2 half pans create a full pan. Some watercolor pans come as a full pan, and it's just basically 2 half pans together in a single pan. So this will fill a full pan. So it's plenty of paint. And then this is the 15 milliliter size, 15 milliliter. Again, Daniel Smith. And I found it on sale somewhere, so I got the larger size because it was actually it was the same price as the smaller one. I was shocked. So good deal there. And then we have another higher grade watercolor. This is by Sennelier. Sennelier is a French company. They've been around for literally forever, like 100 years or something. They have gone to making their paints in pan form also. So they're available both as tubes, as they originally were, and in pans. Highly pigmented. They react really well with water. They mix well together. I really like them. The only reason I don't have a bunch is because they're pretty expensive. So there you are about watercolors. Here's another example of a different type of a palette you can get. Again, the stuff like this is sold on Etsy. Just go to Etsy and enter into the search watercolor palette, and a bunch of them will come up. This is by Essie. Is this an Essie? I'm trying to think. Yeah, this is an Essie. They don't put their name on their palettes. I really wish they would. I mean, you know, because years from now, I'm going to forget. You know, I'm already having short-term memory loss. But anyway, really nice, handmade, hand-formed. I have another one where I can actually see a couple of fingerprints in the clay. It's just really cool, you know. And what I did is I went ahead with another paint set, and this is actually a set of Sennelier granulating watercolors. We'll talk about granulating watercolors way later when I get into how to use those. It's just watercolor that when you mix it with a lot of water, the pigment kind of separates and it forms interesting patterns. It's really cool. So I just went ahead from the tubes and put some in here in this palette. So again, I use each of these wells for that particular color. That's just another thing you can do with your tube paints if you want. So there are the tubes, the pans, and I guess that covers it for types of watercolor and the brushes. I'm going to do a separate video now on the paper because otherwise this is just going to get to be too long. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have any questions, please note them below, or you can email me. A word about the videos that are here at YouTube. They are private links, so we're working on the honor system here because y'all are either enjoying the first month for free and then you'll go off and do other things, Or if you do sign up and do pay the monthly membership fee, remember you're paying to maintain my Patreon and my art channel. I do ask you not to share those links with people who are not paying members. Invite them to come check out my Patreon. You know, it'll help me out. And if you do refer someone to me, I'll figure out some sort of an incentive program for that. The links on YouTube are all private, is what I'm getting at. Only people with the direct link can access those videos. You won't find them on my regular channel if you go look there. You got to have the link. All right, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great one. This is Neferkefri, the Positive Vibes Artist, thanking you for being here and wishing you a blessed day.